Good afternoon, everybody. We're good to go? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined by Jay Shaw, Assistant Chief Emergency Management. We'll both provide opening statements and then be available to answer questions that you might have regarding our remarks or, of course, the topic at hand. I want to begin by acknowledging that we're on Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis. I want to begin my remarks today by reminding Winnipeggers that while the number of Manitobans and Winnipeggers that have been receiving their vaccines, and that's an encouraging sign and something we obviously want to continue to support, we're still in the thick of our battle against COVID-19, and we should not get complacent. Our healthcare system is still in crisis and relying on other provinces for help right now. And I'd like to thank the other provincial governments and the healthcare workers in those provinces who are there for us in this time of critical need. I've also seen reports of federal workers that have arrived in our community to provide support to our provincial government's response and our community's response. And I want to say thank you very much to those workers who are providing that invaluable assistance. Finally, I'd like to thank both our federal government for their support and our provincial government for finally making that request for support. Appreciative of both of their efforts and pleased that they were able to facilitate getting some extra resources in our community. We know our healthcare workers are stretched thin and working hard for our residents. We're grateful for those efforts. And like our provincial healthcare workers, as we've been indicating for years now, the resources of the city's paramedics are increasingly wearing thin as well. In addition to their normal work, they're also taking on the role of supporting the transport of ICU patients out of the province. These increased demands on their time is having an impact. I want to specifically thank our paramedics for their continued work under less than ideal circumstances. So thank you so much. Summer is here, and with an Environment Canada heat warning upon us, the provincial government has provided direction on the opening of municipal facilities to help our residents cool off from the extreme heat that we're under right now and that we're expecting in the near future. Jay will provide more details in a few moments, but I'd like to thank our Emergency Operations Center staff and our public service for their quick work in finding a road to opening these facilities under limited notice, or with limited notice, I should say. They've pivoted very quickly under the circumstances. I'm pleased to see facilities opening for this heat wave. Spray pad facilities, as the city has just announced this morning, will be open, as well as libraries, but they'll be open strictly for the purposes of cooling off. I want to be clear that under the direction of the province of Manitoba, these spaces are opening temporarily only because of the extreme heat. And so in order to accommodate the needs of our community and follow the province's direction, we will be redeploying some of our temporary community service ambassadors that are currently deployed in places like parks for litter cleanup and for communications of the provincial public health orders. They will be redeployed in order to provide some supervision at the spray pads. And I want to thank those community service ambassadors for their important work. I think it's important to note that the spray pads are not normally supervised or staffed in any capacity. And we are obviously going to be asking everyone for their patience and their understanding in helping us meet really two competing needs right now. We have a health emergency with COVID-19. We also have an emergency with the extreme heat. And so the province has allowed the opening of these facilities. They have also been very clear with us that the outdoor facilities will be required to have supervision by facility operators, and that best efforts need to be made to ensure that the public follow proper physical and public health protocols. It's really important that that parents in particular and everybody that is using these facilities use them simply to cool off only, And we're just going to need everybody to be patient and to be supportive of them being used for those purposes. Certainly be available to answer more questions that you might have on that in a few moments. But with that, I'll turn things over to Jay at this time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. My name is Jay Shaw. I'm the Assistant Chief of Emergency Management. Today I'm going to provide you with an update on the city's extreme heat response. With the provincial public health orders that were changed yesterday afternoon, we will now be opening most of the city's spray pads to help provide relief from the heat. 20 of the city's spray pads were turned on at noon today and will operate daily from noon until 8 p.m. until June 12th. And as per the recommendation in the province's heat bulletin issued yesterday afternoon, we will be using community service ambassadors to supervise these sites. Public health orders are still in effect and you are unable to gather with people outside of your household, and you must maintain a separation of 2 meters from others. We are also reminding residents that these are being turned on due to the extreme heat, and therefore we're asking you to think about your neighbors before you come to one of the city's spray pads. If you are able to get relief from the heat at your personal residence because you are fortunate enough to have access to air conditioning, or you have a sprinkler or pool in your own backyard, we are asking you not to use these spray pads at this time so that others are available to those in our community who don't have these options. We are also recommending that users limit their time at the spray pads to a maximum of 30 minutes. Again, these are being opened for our residents who need this as an option to provide relief during this extreme heat. We are not opening our outdoor or wading pools at this time, as these amended provincial health orders are only in effect until next week. In addition to opening spray pads, the city is working to provide heat relief for some of our most vulnerable residents. Earlier this week, we placed water tanks with potable water near the Salvation Army and Broadway Neighborhood Center. These locations were chosen based on feedback from the community and are supported by community organizations. These water tanks are replenished regularly and are available to anyone who is looking for water. We would like to extend our thanks to the Salvation Army and the Broadway Neighborhood Association who have been assisting us with this initiative. We have also partnered with the Downtown Community Safety Partnership to set up a tent in Central Park to provide shade and bottled water for neighborhood residents. This site will be staffed from noon till 8 p.m. daily until June 8th. Thank you to our partners at the Downtown Safety Partnership, End Homeless Winnipeg, and Main Street Project, who have assisted with site guidance and staffing. The city will also have bottled water available outside all of our library branches for those in the neighborhood who are in need. We know many residents normally use our libraries as a spot to refill water containers or get a drink from the fountains, and we want to ensure that those who need it still have access to drinking water while these buildings are closed. I would also like to take a moment to remind you to check in on your family and friends and neighbors during this extreme heat event. While you cannot physically see them, we would encourage you to take a moment to call or text and make sure that they are doing well. Even though our physical contact might be limited at this point, it is still important to take a moment to connect. And finally, don't forget about your furry companions. During this time of extreme heat, let's think about our pets and the impacts that the heat can have on them. We encourage you to keep them safe by limiting their time outdoors and providing ample fresh water. During this heat, we would also like to remind you that it is not a good idea to go biking with your dogs, as they can quickly get exhausted and even burn their paws. And definitely do not leave your pets in your vehicle. We will now take your questions from the media. Thank you.
We'll start with James from the Winnipeg Sun.
Just a political question for me, please.
Okay, we'll hold on you. Joanne from the Winnipeg Free Press.
Hello. So when you talk about just use them to cool off, is that just a warning to folks to avoid using these spots for gatherings, that sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely, Joanne. What we have here is the convergence of two hazards. We have a pandemic going on, and inside of a pandemic, we have a extreme heat warning that's about to take place, and extreme heat's dangerous. So based on the public health advice from the provincial government, these are going to be deemed as respite for heat. And we really want to encourage people to use them to cool off if they have no other means. We want to be able to make sure that we're taking care of all of our residents based on both of these hazards. So, yeah, 30 minutes, and please respect your neighbors, and if you can, get in, get out, cool off. You know, no gatherings, follow all the public health orders, remember the fundamentals, wash your hands, wear a mask, stay apart. You know, we have to take care of each other. We got to get through this for a little bit longer.
Joanne, the province has been very clear that the facilities are being open to address the direct impacts of heat on vulnerable persons and are not intended to be recreational opportunities. They've been very clear with us in that that's the intended purposes of their opening. And they've also been very clear that if proper physical distancing and public health protocols can't be adequately managed, then operations should cease. Of course, how those physical distancing and public health protocols can be adequately managed is something that we have and will continue to have dialogue with the province to get clarity on how they envision that occurring. We're going to be doing our best as we're trying to message today and in the press release to provide adequate supervision. But we're really going to need everybody to be patient and to help with that, especially parents who are taking their kids there to cool off. And we obviously need to get some clarity from the province just to help ensure that we're meeting their intent.
And you said the staff that will be monitoring the spray pads will be redeployed from serving as community service ambassadors and/or the cleanup staff that you noted for parks and trails. So how many of those folks are going to be redeployed from each of those functions that they're doing now?
Yeah, I'll let Jay get into some of the numbers if he has them, but yeah, it is important to keep in mind these staff are only available because of the provincial public health orders closure of our recreation facilities. So for a temporary period of time, we have a limited number of staff available as community services ambassadors. And so with the requirement that there's supervision at the spray pads, these community service ambassadors are being redeployed and pulled from parks where they're providing communications, litter pickup, those sorts of things. So there is a limited number of staff to be able to draw from, keeping in mind that the spray pads are not designed, nor are they normally staffed at all. And so this is a temporary measure using available staff as best as the public service can manage.
And I'll just add, Joanne, we have 129 community service ambassadors and about 40 folks that were redeployed into public works. We're only using the community service ambassadors right now to supervise. What you're going to see today is community service ambassadors visiting these parks. At some of the busier ones, they'll be stationed at them for a while. They'll be mobile, they'll be moving around, and we're going to be doing our best to make sure that we're keeping an eye on all the activities. The safety ambassadors are going to be there, or community service ambassadors are going to be there as advocates for the public safety, and enforcement again is the responsibility of the provincial government. But we're going to do our absolute best. This is a heat emergency, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of our people during the heat. The things I want to tell people, you know, for some warnings here is that we have sort of three main areas that we have to be concerned about the heat. There's heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. And there's lots of good information available on the City of Winnipeg website, and people need to stay in the shade, drink lots of water. Slip on a hat, wear sunscreen, stay in the shade as much as possible, and check in on their neighbors and friends via text and phone call. We're mixing safety messaging here between COVID and heat, so we have to really think about how we can protect our most vulnerable. So check in on people, try and stay cool, stay safe, and you're going to see our community service ambassadors out and about visiting these spray pads. You know, driving to them, walking in and around them, being good stewards for the community, and we're hoping that we don't see, you know, an overabundance of people packing them. And if we do, we're going to follow the public health messaging and public health orders. And if we need to, we might have to close some of the splash pads and spray pads down.
Sorry, so just to be clear, what you said, the 120, of the 129 community service ambassadors, about 40 are going to be redeployed to handle the spray pads?
No. You asked about litter pickup and the folks redeployed to parks. None of those folks right now have been redeployed. We're only using the 129. We're still staffing the parks. We're doing double duty here. So we're still maintaining a presence in St. Vital, Assiniboine, and Kildonan parks. But we are prioritizing for the next 3 or 4 days our heat response. Because of the hazard of extreme heat, we have to make sure that we're taking care of our residents. So the priority is to make sure that we're staffing and working to make sure our splash pads and spray pads are reasonably staffed as directed by the public health orders. But we are also maintaining a presence in the park because people are still using our parks and we have to make sure that people aren't gathering inappropriately. Lots of work to do, and we're asking for our city residents to be respectful.
Sorry, so you're not, you said redeployed earlier, but you're not saying that they're redeployed to just the spray pads. You're saying it's sort of added into their duties now.
Correct. Yeah. We're going to pull some of them from the parks to work at the splash pads.
They'll be spending less time at the parks in the coming days as they're spread out a little bit more to include spray pads now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Moving to Merrick from Global.
Hey there, guys. Thanks for taking the time. I just have a question. Obviously, there's been chatter provincially and in some other jurisdictions, just in the preliminary stages of maybe people that are vaccinated being able to do more things than people that aren't vaccinated. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that, Mayor Bowman, and if there's been any talks at the city level of that maybe potentially happening.
Could you be a little clearer in that question in terms of you're wondering if are you talking about vaccine passports or?
No. Well, whether it be, being allowed into city facilities or whatever the activity may be, have you guys considered or will be considering not allowing unvaccinated people to partake in activities or going into places?
There hasn't been any substantive discussions about that at this stage. The focus really is on trying to get as many people vaccinated as possible. And I'll just take this opportunity to encourage people to, when you're eligible, get out there and get your vaccine. No, that issue and that topic of vaccine passports, certainly international travel, there's been standards set up for many years in terms of international travel, but certainly as a lawyer who used to practice as a privacy lawyer and is mindful of the rights that Canadians have, what I've been watching is just I want to be mindful of ensuring that we're cautious about the intended and unintended consequences of those sorts of measures for access to public services. But there hasn't been any. To answer your question, there hasn't been any substantive consideration or discussions about it yet. I've raised the topic with the provincial health minister. But there hasn't, just as an issue that I think governments need to start getting their head around, because there's a balancing of rights and interests that need to be managed. But there hasn't been any substantive discussion on it yet.
Thanks, Merrick. We'll move to Sean from CBC.
Good morning, gentlemen. Jake, which libraries are going to be open? Is it all of them? And could you just kind of paint a picture of how you're going to manage people going to them? Are you going to have a section of the library open for people to sit at, physically distanced, or how does that look?
So great question, and let me clarify. Libraries are remaining closed. They're open for holds pickup, and the regular service that we're providing is holds pickup for library books and drop-off. But because we have staff there doing the holds pickup, we will be able to provide that bottled water service at all of the libraries throughout the city. So libraries will remain closed, but when if in your community, we are providing bottled water. So when we look, Sean, at heat throughout the city of Winnipeg, heat is an issue, extreme heat's an issue in all sections of the city. So we wanted to be able to provide services for all residents everywhere. And what we're seeing from our library staff is that a lot of folks pop into the library to fill up their bottle, say hi, and grab a quick drink. So because the libraries are closed and only allow for the holds pickup, we are encouraging folks that if they need to, we're not asking for a rush to our libraries, but if you need to, you can come and pick up a bottle of water at the library.
Wow, I must have completely misunderstood at the earlier part of the press conference, because I thought you'd said that some libraries would be open to provide cooling centers. In as much as that you're not, in speaking to some of the outreach organizations that do a lot of work, they have opened their doors throughout the day to give people an opportunity to cool down. But I have heard some concern that, they may get overcapacity and bump up against physical distance rules. So can you walk through why you've chosen not to keep the library or open some libraries?
It's not that we haven't chosen. This is just the first bit of announcements. I am looking at other options for cooling centers, but I don't have any other further issues or further comments at this time. Stay tuned. I'm going to try and we'll get through this heat wave in the next couple days, and we are working with our community partners in downtown, the Main Street Project, Siloam, Salvation Army, and if required, we're going to assist, and we'll take a look and see if we can get something else open up. But I don't have any information right now.
Okay.
Thanks, Sean. We'll move back to Joanne.
Hi, so the press release said that 20 of 23, I think, spray pads open. Did they all open at noon, or are we still working on that? It said beginning Thursday.
Yeah, I believe I'm going to take a shot and say that they're all open, but I know we were getting them all fired up and tested last night. So bear with us. If they're not all open, they will be open soon this afternoon. But we did plan on getting them all open for noon. So and getting our staff transition from the parks to get them staffed. So we're just asking for a little bit of patience, and please try and follow the public health orders if you're going to use those facilities.
And why are we not opening outdoor pools, that sort of thing? Is that due to a lack of staff, or are there other reasons?
It's a combination of all of it, but for the most part, the public health orders are only allowing this provision until the 12th of June, and specifically while we're in a heat wave. So in order to use these provisions, our interpretation and communication with the province is if you're in a heat wave between now and June 12th, you can use these facilities for the purposes of providing respite from heat, not for recreation, but for the purposes of providing respite for heat. So in order to pivot, we would probably have to change a whole bunch of things with the CSA program, and between now and June 12th, not feasible. The timing of opening up outdoor pools, wading pools, things of that nature are all based on the next set of public health orders. So we'll work with the province when we get the next set of public health orders and get an idea when we can open up those other facilities that our residents really like to use. So
Is it really staffing though? Like, is that just too quick to bring people back for a few days? I mean, I could see logistically that'd be really difficult.
yeah, that's one part of it for sure.
Yeah, keep in mind the provincial public health orders. I mean, the city's pretty active participant with the extreme weather committee and third-party stakeholders, but the provincial public health orders just came out yesterday afternoon, and so I just want to acknowledge the timeliness of the public services response.
And so,
Sorry, Joanne, you're breaking up there.
Go ahead, Joanne.
no, I got muted. I was probably lost track of my count of questions. I can wait till the next round if we need, but I do have more.
Okay, we'll move to Merrick from Global.
Just for some clarification, Jay, you had originally said that the city workers would be by the spray pads, pardon me, for 3 to 4 days. Does that mean like if the weather, if we see if it gets cooler, that you'll pull the staff or before
Yeah.
June 12th?
Yeah, that's a potential. We're going to work with the province and get some more clarification. But right now, the public health orders are from yesterday at 12 noon until the 12th, and while we're in a heat wave. So we're taking a look at that. Right now, we are in a heat wave, going to be about 32 degrees today, maybe even 35 plus tomorrow. We need to be able to provide that respite for our residents. And we're encouraging people to stay cool, stay in the shade, drink lots of water, stay out of the heat, take care of yourself. The reason why is a heat emergency can be dangerous. A heat emergency can put you in the hospital, and it can even cause death. So we have to be very careful with this, what we call, complexity analysis of both COVID-19 and heat mixing together. Heat already has a tremendous impact on seniors and people with health conditions. When you add COVID-19 into the mix, it can be deadly. So we really want to make sure that we're getting that good messaging out, to check on your neighbors, call, text, making sure that we're making every possible a step that we can do to make sure that we're keeping cool and staying safe while following the public health orders.
Thanks, Merrick. We'll move to Sean.
Outside of the waiting pools, a lot of the effort in the next 72 hours or so will be focused on vulnerable people who are sleeping rough, et cetera. But there's a whole group of Winnipeggers that they don't have air conditioning. And some would be elderly. And normally these people would go to malls, they would go to restaurants, coffee shops, they would go to a movie theater to get a couple hours of break from the heat. All of those things are unavailable, but this plan so far doesn't have any opportunity for them to get that respite. And I'd just like you to speak to that.
Yeah, Sean, I understand what you're talking about in terms of people who may be vulnerable and living in apartment buildings or no air conditioning in that aspect. And currently, the public health orders are telling folks that you need to shop as an individual. There's reduction in capacities down to 10% in the public health orders. We're doing our part to be able to get some bottled water out there, provide some outdoor shade. We have to mix the risk and hazard analysis between COVID-19 and the heat emergency. And we are working with our partners at Main Street Project, Salvation Army, and others. And we are looking at other opportunities to be able to provide relief if it's needed. So I understand your question, and we're stepping up to be able to provide these services right now, and we'll work with our partners to see if there's more needed.
Both yourself and the mayor have mentioned a couple of times now that the health orders came out at 12 o'clock, and you're reacting to that. Anybody that's been on these calls for the last year, the city seems to get the information for the changes to the orders close to or at the time that they're made public. Is that the case here? Did you have a very little advance warning of what the amendments would look like?
I had a little bit of advance warning, but the public health orders always need to come out, and then we need to be able to review and do our regular process and make sure we have a crystal clear clarity in both spirit and the words, so that we can make sure we're doing everything we can to follow them. So in this case, I did get a little bit of a heads up that they were looking at doing something, but it wasn't until everything was released that we had full clarity on what had happened. So, yeah.
Yeah, even on the issue of supervision at the spray pads, Sean, there's the provincial press releases, and then there's the orders. They're not always consistent. So our public service follows up with the counterparts at the province to try to get that direction. I mean, we're currently doing that in terms of how the supervision should be conducted and what expectations the province has for adequately managing the physical distancing and public health protocols at spray pads. So that's one, even where the province has released things, there's quite often we are proactively following up with the province to get that clarity. In the meantime, we're still moving forward with opening the spray pads today because it is a heat emergency, but you know, that clarity isn't always there. So we're doing the best we can with the info that we have when we get it.
Thanks, Sean. We'll go back to Joanne.
Hey, so I'm just wondering, will the city call back staff in the future to open outdoor pools as heat waves continue, or what are the thoughts on that?
That'll all be based on the next set of public health orders. So right now, we did have some staff that chose not to be redeployed. And when we see new public health orders that allow us to open up other recreation activities, and hopefully once we get more people vaccinated and the test positivity comes down and we're in a much more stable place COVID-wise, we'd love to be able to provide those services. So that'll be dependent on the public health orders.
And is the staffing limited because the city, knowing it was coping with the pandemic and being ordered to close so many rec facilities, didn't hire the same type of, you know, amount of part-time staff it normally would?
Yeah, I don't have line of sight on that. Let me see if we can get you more information on who we've hired, when, and where in our community service and recreation program. We'll get back to you on that one because I just don't have that in front of me in terms of my notes.
Okay. And will any other city facilities at all service cooling places? I know you said libraries aren't going to, they're going to hand out water, but are any other ones up for consideration?
Well, I said libraries are closed right now as cooling centers. They're open for Holtz pickup, and if you need and you want, you can grab a bottle of water there. We are looking at other opportunities for cooling centers in consultation with our stakeholders, and to see what's possible and to see what's needed.
It's also, Joanne, today's announcements are what the public service can announce today. And as you know, again, the orders have just come out. So, you know, this is what the city's able to announce and implement today. But, you know, the more that we can do, the better. We're also having outreach to the province to see what they're doing to deal with the heat emergency as well. They're part of the extreme weather protocol committee and group. We're working primarily with third parties, but that may be a question that you raise with the province as well, in addition to giving the ability for municipalities to open spray pads and things like that. I mean, we're talking about health and housing and social services, probably a relevant question for the province as well.
And actually, you just talked about this. You said there was a bit of advance warning, but not the full details. And the full details you didn't get till the public health orders came out. Sorry, I missed it earlier, but I think you said, was that noon today the public health orders came out, or when exactly did they come out?
I want to say last night late, but I'd have to get back to you on that about when the actual legal orders came out.
They're not typically released at the same time the press releases go out, and so of course press releases go out, press conference happens at the province, and then of course the expectation is, understandably from the media and others, that the city is ready to implement immediately. And you know, we do want to see the orders to see what's legally binding, and then have that dialogue with the province. It'd be ideal if that was done in advance of the province making things public, so that we could all be aligned and implement as quickly as possible, especially given the fact that the forecast has been known for some time. The extreme heat is here. Better coordination would help everybody, especially our residents, but we're doing the best we can with the information we have when we get it.
Okay. And if you could just refresh my memory, I don't know if there's a handy list somewhere on this, but what facilities are usually offered by the city as cooling sites when we don't have a pandemic to also worry about?
Yeah, so the Millennium Library is usually a staple in our heat and cold response. So that's one facility. And then there, you know, normally when we're not in a pandemic, there's plenty of spaces for people to be able to seek some respite from the heat, or the opposite in cold emergencies as well, where you might need the ability to go somewhere to warm up. So, but currently we're in a pandemic, so very challenging right now in order to be able to balance the risk between COVID and the heat emergencies. And with the public health orders limiting and closing some facilities, which is required to be able to protect us against COVID, you have this complexity when we add a heat emergency in there. So challenging. We've announced some things today, and we'll be assessing and looking, and we may be able to do more this week regarding the heat, because it is going to be a few days. So I am working to see what that looks like, and to work with our stakeholders and partners, and if required and needed, we'll take a look at cooling center options.
Thanks, Joanne. We'll move to Merrick.
I'm sorry, I'm good. I'm good for now, thanks.
Okay, we'll move to Sean.
Yes, my last question would be, so my understanding of disaster planning and crisis is that there's a coordination. I understand the pandemic is different. It's a health issue, and it's led by the province, and it flows down to the municipalities, but we're talking about, in your words, a heat emergency. So I would liken that similar to floods or major fires. And so when you're approaching an emergency like that, there's no consistent communication between the province and the city early on. As the mayor said, we've known that this heat event was coming for days.
Yeah.
You don't sit at a table virtually with the province days before that to envision how you'd cope with an emergency? Is that what you're saying?
Not for this specific event, no.
Okay.
That's
all the questions I have.
Yeah, Sean, the best vehicle right now for that is the Extreme Weather Committee, and like I said, the city is really the most active level of government with that group. It does include, I understand, provincial representation through agencies, and so provincial officials are effectively at the table. A lot of that work is coordinated by End Homelessness Winnipeg, because the focus is on vulnerable Winnipeggers. And it was structured as such to deal with not just extreme cold weather, but also heat. So a lot of that advance work has happened, but in terms of your question, when you factor in the COVID emergency that we're in, or crisis, and the orders that are evolving weekly from the provincial government, that's where, to be able to gel those announcements that the province is making with the protocols that are in place, that's where more proactivity would be better, and increased heads up, so that we could implement quicker. But we're doing, again, the best we can under the circumstances.
Thanks, Sean. We'll go back to Joanne.
Okay, I guess I just have one more on this topic. With the province's requirement that you must have supervision in place to maintain the physical distancing and make sure health orders are followed, is that a big piece of what's sort of preventing the city from being able to add other options? Because as you mentioned, I mean, spray pads wouldn't even normally be staffed, and now they must be.
Yeah, I think that's, a fair statement, and such that we have a limited amount of resources in terms of our staff that are not able to work because of the public health orders and the COVID emergency. But it's really just about figuring out the logistics and how we're going to move the puzzle pieces around to be able to, supervise parks, get the splash pads and spray pads open cooling centers, and do these things that are aspects of a heat emergency inside a pandemic, where there's health rules and complexity. It's a tremendous challenge, and and where we're at right now is we continue to assess and look and see what else needs to be done. But for right now, we've taken some steps to be able to help with the respite for heat. And you know, we'll get through today and keep monitoring Assiniboine, Kildonan, and St. Vital Park. And we're going to get our CSAs out, monitoring, driving around, staffing, and providing us some intelligence on you know, what's happening at our pads, and supervising as reasonably best as we can for today.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. That will conclude the COVID-19 update, and we'll say goodbye to Jay.
And sorry, were there were questions for me? Okay. Thanks very much.
I have to bow out. I'd love to do the political side of all this, but I have to go somewhere. So my best to both of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Have a good afternoon.
You too, sir.
Thanks.
Afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, James.
Yeah, this morning the province announced $1 million to fight vaccine hesitancy, and what's your reaction to that?
They haven't spoken with me, so I'm not able to comment on it. So I haven't seen any of the details of that yet.
Okay, well, that's basically it. They're contributing $1 million to fight and provide education for vaccine hesitancy, and it's in $20,000 allotments to community organizations, religious organizations, sports, arts, culture, any community group really that wants to do their part to educate people and to get people vaccinated. So that's the Coles notes of it. Is that enough information for you to provide a comment?
Not a detailed comment, but what I can say is obviously we've been raising with provincial officials for many months the issue of vaccine hesitancy and the need for clear, consistent messages. We've been trying, as you know, if you follow the City of Winnipeg's feed and my own, we're trying to do our best to combat vaccine hesitancy, as well as to offer assistance in breaking down the barriers that exist in our community for people learning about and having access to vaccines. But in terms of the measures they've announced today, just again, it hasn't been communicated with me. There hasn't been any outreach directly from the province, so I haven't had a chance to see what they've publicly released yet.
Why is the communication so terrible? This is such an important topic.
Well, that's a question you might want to raise for the province. I'm consistently reaching out. I've requested numerous times over the course of the pandemic to have direct dialogue with the Premier, and he's unable or unwilling to have that dialogue directly with me. It's unfortunate. In the meantime, we do reach out when we need to communicate with the province directly to ministers, and so that's a question, James, that you should raise with the province. I remain available. I make numerous requests to have that dialogue. I think we work better together when we actually have dialogue together, and so we'll continue to do our best to remain available and reach out consistently to request that dialogue.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, you too, James.
Hi, I just got a question from someone about the Dakota spray pad that I'm wondering myself now, like that one I don't think is on that list of the ones that are opening. Is it also considered a wading pool because it's got that sort of deeper part, or do you know why that one didn't make the cut? You know what?
You'd have to follow up with the public service, Joanne. Politically, we're not, providing political direction on which ones are opening. I think all members of council want to see all the spray pads open, as far as I'm concerned. And so I know there were a few that couldn't open right now, and hopefully the public service can provide you with an explanation, as well as if some are wading pools versus spray pads or just fountains, for example. Sorry that I don't have that off the top of my head, though. Sorry.
That's okay. I can follow up on that. I'm just also wondering, there is an issue, like a separate issue that isn't pandemic related, but of some homes on Semple Avenue having cement coming up in their sewers, some kind of cement-like substance. I'm just wondering, will there be city coverage for any of the damage to that? Because it seems to relate to a sewer update project.
You know what, I haven't received any information on that issue. It's something I can certainly look into, Joanne, but yeah, I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that situation you're describing right now.
Okay.
Which street was that again? Just,
Semple?
okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Have a good afternoon.
You too.